Reality doesn't make any sense, and I don't mean that as an exaggeration. We know more about the surface of a distant planet dozens of light years away than we know about our own existence. We understand more about the forces that govern black holes than we do about why we have a sense of self. The thing we call reality collapses under even the slightest scrutiny. Yet, it's something that every single person who has ever existed has experienced. That is the paradox of reality. It is simultaneously the most familiar and the most mysterious thing we will ever encounter. So mysterious, in fact, that for most of our history, reality was taken at face value. The world is here because it is. Rocks are hard because they are. The sun rises because it does. Asking why was considered a bit of a fool's errand, like asking why water's wet. But eventually, those cracks started to appear. Philosophers, mystics, scientists, and ordinary people in strange states of consciousness all came to the same uncomfortable conclusion. Reality isn't as straightforward as it looks. If reality is so obvious, why do your senses contradict themselves? Why do entire traditions describe the world as an illusion? And why do physicists, the very people who claim to be the keepers of certainty, tell us that matter is mostly empty space, time isn't absolute, and nothing is as stable as it seems? The rabbit hole of reality goes deep, way deeper than you think. From personal accounts of altered states to sprawling systems of philosophy to cutting-edge science, we find the same impossible situation. What we think of as reality comes in levels, and the deeper you go, the stranger it gets. So let's dive in. Level 1, the consensus reality. Level 1 is the surface, the one we all start on, the one we all more or less can agree on. Call it consensus reality. This is the world that you wake up in every morning. You brush your teeth, grab your keys, head out the door, and everything seems straightforward. Tables are solid, water's wet, and if you stub your toe on the way out, it's going to hurt. Things remain where you left them. Objects have boundaries. Everything else seems to be navigating the world the exact same way that you are. Consensus reality feels self-evident. The ground feels like ground. The air feels like air. But if you push just a little harder on these everyday assumptions, everything starts to wobble. Take your senses, for example. They're the only reason you believe that the world is out there. And yet, your senses are notoriously untrustworthy. Optical illusions trick your eyes. Mirages bend light into landscapes that don't exist. Phantom limb syndrome convinces amputees that a leg that has been cut off is still there. And this mirror trick literally convinces your brain that a fake arm that you put there by yourself is yours. Hallucinations create voices and visions out of nothing. Even something as simple as color blindness shows that two people standing side by side can be experiencing the world in completely different ways. Consensus reality is far less solid than it seems. Rather than objective truth, it's a stitched together agreement, a kind of unspoken contract between nervous systems that says, yes, this is the world, let's all pretend we're seeing the same thing. But at this stage, reality is just the stage set, the furniture of existence. And yet, as with any stage set, you can't help but wonder what's behind it. The realm of perception. At level 2, we start to peel away the curtain. Here, reality isn't just out there, it's in here, inside your brain. Your senses don't deliver reality directly, they deliver fragments, chaos. The world doesn't come pre-packaged in neat shapes and colors. It comes as wavelengths of light, vibrations of air molecules, chemical signatures drifting through space. And your brain has to do the heavy lifting of turning that chaos into something usable. Vision is the easiest example. Light enters your eye, hits the retina, flips the image upside down, and sends an electrical signal down to the optic nerve. What your brain actually gets is a scrambled, two-dimensional pattern of electricity. Your brain then has to flip it back, stitch the blind spots together, and fill in those missing details. What you think of as seeing isn't the raw feed from the world, it's a best guess reconstruction. And it's not just vision. Time itself gets stitched together. Your brain takes discrete moments, like still frames in a movie reel, and smooths them into what feels like a continuous flow. That's why you don't perceive the gaps when you blink. That's why a magician can palm a card without you noticing. Your brain edits reality like a film editor, cutting and splicing, hoping that you don't catch the seams. Smell, taste, touch, all of them are selective, biased, and tuned more for survival than for revealing or expressing truth. Dogs hear frequencies we don't. Bees see colors that we can't. Birds navigate magnetic fields that we can't even perceive. Your reality is not the reality. It's a narrow slice, a customized interface your species evolved to handle. The philosopher Donald Hoffman calls it the user interface theory of perception. Just like a computer desktop isn't the computer itself, your senses are not the world. They're icons on the desktop, convenient and useful, but never the real machinery. At level 2, the unsettling realization is this: you don't see reality. You see your brain's version of reality, and that means the real reality, whatever it is, will always be hidden from you. Level 3, the realm of belief. Level 3 is where things start to get really slippery, because here, reality isn't just perception, it's interpretation. Take money. Physically, it's just paper, ink, or numbers flickering on a server somewhere. But socially, it's a force that can dictate where you live, who you marry, and how long you survive. Money has no inherent reality. Its reality comes from collective agreement, belief reinforced billions of times a day until it feels as solid as granite. Or take borders. Look at the Earth from space, and you won't see any lines dividing countries. But down here, those invisible lines decide whether you're free or imprisoned, safe or endangered, wealthy or impoverished. They're abstractions, concepts, but they shape lives as powerfully as mountains and rivers. Even morality itself, our sense of right and wrong, is built on cultural frameworks. Cannibalism might be a taboo in one society and a sacred ritual in another. Marriage, gender roles, honor, justice, all of them realities that we live inside, but realities that are made of man-made ideas. Ideas that can bend and change over time, stretching and collapsing to fit the needs of the group. This is what the anthropologist Clifford Geertz called webs of significance. We are suspended in them, we spin them, we get tangled in them, we pass them down from generation to generation. Level 3 reality is not physical at all, but it is no less real for it. Ideas, beliefs, and shared symbols create worlds we inhabit as fully as any physical landscape. But here's the kicker. Because this level is built on interpretation, it can fracture. Competing realities can clash. One group's sacred truth is another's absurd fiction. And when those realities collide, wars are fought, nations fall, and entire ways of being vanish. At level 3, reality is no longer something you just see. It's something you participate in, construct, and maintain. But if reality can be constructed, what does that mean about the layers that are deeper? Level 4, the realm of science. At this level, reality really stops playing nice. Up until now, things felt at least somewhat stable. Shared objects, sensory reconstructions, cultural agreements. But when science digs deeper, that entire foundation cracks open. Take matter, for instance. Everything around you feels solid. The table beneath your hands, the floor underneath your feet. But zoom in far enough and you'll find that what you're touching is mostly empty space. Atoms aren't little billiard balls all clumped together. They're ghostly probability clouds surrounding a nucleus that is itself almost entirely nothing. If you scaled an atom up to the size of a football stadium, the nucleus would be a grain of rice on the 50-yard line, and the electrons would be like gnats buzzing somewhere in the nosebleed seats. Everything else is just empty, and yet you feel solidity because of the electromagnetic forces between the atoms that are resisting each other. You never actually touch that table. Your atoms are simply repelling its atoms. Or consider time. To your everyday mind, time flows smoothly forward, a river carrying you from past to future. But Einstein's relativity shattered that illusion. Time can stretch, bend, and warp depending on how fast you move or how much gravity you're sitting in. An astronaut orbiting Earth for 6 months will return slightly younger than their twin on the ground, and that isn't science fiction, it is experimental fact. And then there's quantum mechanics. If relativity bent reality, quantum mechanics completely blew it up. At the atomic scale, particles don't exist in neat positions. They exist as probability waves, mathematical smears of possibility. Only when you measure them do they collapse into something definite. It's as if reality refuses to pick a shape until you're looking at it, as if it's saying to you, well, I'll only be there when you're there to notice me. Like how the toys in Toy Stories only act as toys when humans are around. What's even stranger is that particles can be entangled, linked, in such a way that changing one instantly changes the other, even if they're separated by light years. At this level, reality is no longer intuitive. It's not the stage set that you walk around on. It's a bizarre, counterintuitive, almost dreamlike structure of equations and paradoxes. The philosopher J.A. Wheeler put it bluntly, no phenomenon is a phenomenon until it is an observed phenomenon. In other words, observation doesn't just reveal reality, in some sense, it creates it. Level 4 leaves us with a deep unease. The very tools that we use to prove reality end up undermining it. The microscope and telescope don't just show us more reality, they show us that reality itself may be slippery, provisional, and stranger than we can imagine. Level 5, the simulation layer. If Level 4 dismantles reality, Level 5 reimagines it altogether. This is the level where philosophers, futurists, and scientists start asking, what if there isn't a base reality at all? What if all of this is just a simulation? The idea is simple, almost too simple admittedly. If it's possible for civilizations to create highly realistic simulations, worlds as vivid as our own, then statistically it's far more likely that we're in one than not. After all, our base reality could spawn thousands, millions, even billions of simulations, and if so, the odds that you are in the real one are vanishingly small. This argument, popularized by philosopher Nick Bostrom, forces a radical reconsideration. Imagine that your senses, your body, your memories, even your deepest emotions are just data being rendered in real time. Imagine that the laws of physics are simply the engine of this universe, and that gravity, time, electromagnetism, and all of that are just the underlying code. And here's the unnerving part. From inside the system, you would never know. Just like a character in a video game doesn't realize they're in a game, we may be unable to perceive anything beyond the walls of this simulation. Every glitch could be dismissed as coincidence. Every anomaly could be patched. Of course, not everyone takes this literally. Some see the simulation hypothesis as a metaphor. Maybe we're not in a computer, but reality does behave like a coded system. Emergent rules generating complexity, layers stacked upon layers, illusions stacked upon illusions. Whether literal or figurative, the simulation question makes one thing clear. Reality may not be ultimate. It might be nested, a copy of a copy. And if that's true, then what we call real is just the interface, just the rendered software of a program running somewhere else. Level 6. Mystical reality. At this level, science and philosophy gives way to something older, mysticism. Because for thousands of years, entire cultures have been saying what physicists are now only starting to whisper. The world you see is not the real world. It's a veil, an illusion. Hinduism calls it Maya. Buddhism calls it samsara. Gnostics call it a false world or a trap. Across traditions, the message is strikingly consistent. The everyday world is less real than it appears, and behind it lies a deeper ground of meaning. Mystics, meditators, and psychonauts often report dissolving into this deeper layer. They describe reality as melting, as boundaries between self and the world collapsing, the chair, the floor, the breath, the body, all of it revealed as one continuous field, more vivid than vivid, more real than real. The writer Aldous Huxley called it the mind at large. Neuroscientists studying psychedelics speak of the default mode network dissolving, the brain's internal storyteller shutting down, allowing raw experience to flood in. Whatever the mechanism, the effect is the same. The world you thought was solid becomes transparent, and something infinite shines through. Here, reality is not something that you live in. Reality is something you are, and everything else too. The line between subject and object, self and other, collapses. What's left is unity, one vast, undivided whole. Level 6 raises profound questions. If this state feels more real than everyday life, which one should we call reality? And if mystical traditions across the world have pointed to this for millennia, does that mean science has been peering at shadows while ignoring the light? Level 7, the unknowable realm. Finally, we reach the last level, the place where all descriptions fail, where every model, every belief, every theory collapses. Call it the unknowable, the ineffable, the groundless ground. This is where philosophy runs out of language, where science admits ignorance, where spirituality falls back on metaphor. Because whatever reality ultimately is, it's beyond concepts. The Tao Te Ching begins with the line, "The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao." In other words, the moment you try to define ultimate reality, you've already missed it. The map is not the territory, the word water is not wet. At this level, reality is less something to be solved and more something to be experienced. It's the silence behind thought, the mystery behind measurement, the abyss behind existence itself. Maybe it's the source of consciousness. Maybe it's the hidden laws that generate universes. Maybe it's something forever inaccessible to us. But perhaps that's the truest insight. Reality is not a riddle to be cracked. It's the very medium in which riddles, questions, and answers arise. It's not something you stand outside of and analyze. It's something you are, inescapably, at every moment. From consensus reality to perception to belief to physics to simulation to mysticism, all the way to the unknowable, the journey through the 7 levels of reality doesn't just reveal how strange the world is. It reveals how strange it is to even be here at all. Maybe reality isn't one thing or 7 things. Maybe it's the act of layering itself, the way each level hides the next, the way the obvious conceals the incomprehensible. And maybe the deepest truth of reality isn't that it's an illusion or a simulation or an ineffable mystery. Maybe the deepest truth is that it's all of those at once. The year is 2030. Your lover is a Labubu with the personality of a waifu created by Grok AI. Your best friend is a terrible-looking, always-listening necklace. And Meta is there to present you with ads right in front of your eyes, 24/7. Your landlord is an app that owns half the block. Your boss is a dashboard that pings at midnight about wellness. And the cereal box that you grew up with is now 2 inches thinner and somehow more expensive. Everything you used to own is now a rental. Everything you can afford is now worse quality. As you lay on your bed at night, you turn your head slowly to the bedside lamp beside you. The perspective of the lamp seems odd, like it's inverted. You stare at it for long enough until you realize the lamp is not real. The world is not real. The world ended in 2020, and we're all living in hell. This is obviously not literal, but it's the feeling that a lot of people have been experiencing. Like something fundamentally changed about our existence after the pandemic. Something that we haven't been able to recover from ever since. There's a moment everyone can point to in their lives. The last day in the office, the final commute home, the afternoon the school pickup line was quiet in a way that it had never been. For many, the old world did not collapse with spectacle. It simply stopped. 2 weeks to flatten the curve became months of waiting, and waiting itself changed us. Young people in particular described the veil of ordinary life ripping open. No more proms, no more campus life, internships, first jobs, new houses, moving cities. Almost every rite of passage for young people swapped for a blinking cursor and a Google Meet link. For many, this was not just a reality check, but a complete upheaval. A realization that reality is nothing but a scaffolding held together by agreements that can be revoked without warning. And once you've taken a look beyond the veil, once you've stared at the fuzzy-looking lamp with a weird perspective, it's hard to unsee it. It's hard to go back to your old life with the new understanding that it was all a facade. Time itself changed shape. The monotony of lockdown turned days, even weeks, into complete blurs. When nothing changes around you, the brain stops trying to lay down boundaries, and so everything starts to blend into one another. And it feels like this feeling of time warping still hasn't healed. Ask almost everyone you know, and they'll tell you that time itself feels fundamentally different. It's been 6 years since the COVID-19 virus first broke out. Over half a decade. But it doesn't feel like that. It feels like the lockdown was at most 2 years ago. Perhaps one of the reasons for this is that those big moments that mark transitions in life still haven't come back, at least not for most people. Young people are struggling to find jobs now more than ever. People can no longer afford to move away from their parents' house, and young people are not as interested in marriage and having kids, presumably because of all the economic issues that the world is going through. So essentially, what you have is years of the same, with no milestones that give you that solid sense of time passing. Our brain records time in moments and seasons. When there are no moments to mark, time becomes a weird, continuous blob. When our shared reality is tampered with, we look to institutions to help guide us through the uncertainty. Unfortunately, this is one of the many casualties of life after the pandemic. In the wake of the pandemic, we were told it would only take 2 weeks, 15 days to slow the spread. Just a small pause and then life would spring back up. But 2 weeks became 2 months, and 2 months became nearly 2 years of on and off restrictions for a lot of people. Masks had a similar story. First, we were told not to buy medical masks and to save them for hospitals, since there was little evidence they worked for the general public. Just weeks later, the message flipped. Masks were recommended, then required in most places. Now, this is not a dig at the scientists who were trying to understand a once-in-a-lifetime disease. They were working with limited information and shifting data. But the way these messages landed with the public was simple. They sounded unsure. And if they were unsure about this, well, how could we trust them to be sure about anything? And I want to make it absolutely clear that this is not a fair comparison. Science is an ever-evolving field, and the fact that they were willing to change their position based on new information is the very reason we should trust them in the first place. But Sadly, when faced with this kind of scary situation, most people can't be rational and instead rely on their natural instincts to doubt everything. All of this, combined with the fact that most of us were bored indoors with nothing to do, gave rise to a new wave of misinformation, anti-science, and just plain old conspiracy theories. All of which still remain today. Just go online, and you'll see people with millions of followers discrediting the scientists on about every single thing you can imagine. I mean, RFK Jr. is now in power, telling people that Tylenol causes autism, which is just not true, by the way, in case you needed to hear that. Now, anti-science claims like anti-vax didn't start in 2020, but it definitely had exponential growth, especially with many countries mandating their citizens to take them. When people's personal freedoms are threatened, even if for the greater good, they do tend to fight back. And it wasn't just science. People lost trust in those in power too. Lockdowns were strict on all of us. Weddings were delayed. People attended funerals for their loved ones through Zoom. Families were separated for months. Yet it seemed like these rules weren't the same for the 1%. All around the world, top politicians, celebrities, and even the health minister of New Zealand were caught hosting lavish parties, taking family trips, and organizing weddings, while the rest of us were forced to stay inside. And what did they get? Most of them simply made silly apologies and got fines that are honestly less than slaps on the wrist for these ultra-wealthy people. It just made it clear to the entire world that even in a life and death situation, the people at the top still get to do whatever they want and will never face any real consequences for it. Once people had that realization, the mandates stopped sounding like a call to our shared humanity and started sounding like control. That trust was broken, and it has still not been repaired. I don't know if it ever can be repaired. And to make matters worse, while all of this was going on, millions of people were getting laid off. Thousands of small businesses had to shut down, while at the same time, companies boasted record profits. The big businesses hoarded most of the government bailouts, and the rich kept getting richer. While most people had to shrink their lives to fit inside small rooms, big tech was living large. If you sold anything digital, the pandemic was like stumbling on an entire planet filled with gold mines. Zoom, Netflix, YouTube, companies that were designed to foster digital entertainment and work, saw record numbers. But at the same time, local restaurants died quietly, local gyms disappeared, and small businesses ran out of money. Wealth that would have been spread among many hands condensed into fewer. This would have been fine if the record amount of profits these big tech companies were getting somehow trickled down to the everyday people. Trickle-down economics, as the rich always like to point out. But it didn't. In fact, it was quite the opposite. While companies were boasting about record profits to their shareholders, they were also laying off thousands of workers and telling the ones that stayed that raises were impossible. All of this while still giving their consumers crappy services and increasing prices. Big tech companies had some of their biggest layoffs of all time in the few years just after the pandemic, numbers that have still not recovered and, in many places, are actually getting worse, no thanks to AI. For us consumers, everything we bought became worse. Shrinkflation moved from a nerdy term you hear from your economics professor to a household phrase. I'm sure you've noticed how everything you buy now seems to have reduced in size and/or quality, while at the same time increasing in price. Companies discovered they could grow revenue without making anything better through subscriptions. The rise of the subscription model has exploded since the pandemic. Entire industries pivoted from buy it once to rent this forever. Software became a subscription. Printers wanted ink memberships. Cars flirted with monthly fees for features already built into the seat that you are sitting on. Repairs moved behind proprietary walls, so you don't own a thing so much as lease the right to keep it working. The slogan might as well be, you will own less and pay more often. Even where nothing shrank on the shelf, the service shrank around it. Skimpflation is the quiet downgrade you feel everywhere. Longer wait times, fewer staff in offices, support that routes you through a chat bot that apologizes in perfect lowercase and solves nothing. Restaurants added temporary surcharges that never went away. Convenience fees show up on tickets that you bought yourself. And just when your total makes you flinch, a screen swivels around to ask for a 25% tip on a bottle of water. It's not just inflation, it's the feeling that the customer experience is being carved up for parts. Housing is the clearest example of how that logic rewrote daily life. When borrowing was cheap, institutional buyers treated homes like houses in Monopoly. They bought at scale, rented at scale, and priced at scale. Today, a starter home has become a story that you tell about your parents. The story that we were sold was that economic growth would reach us all, that tax breaks and government bailouts for the rich would trickle down to better benefits and products for the poor. But the reality is we have people well on their way to becoming trillionaires, while half of the world doesn't have access to clean and drinkable water. What do you do when all of this is happening so relentlessly? When every day you wake up, you're hit with yet another terrible news story on how the world is about to end and there's nothing that we can do about it. When the lockdowns came, all we had were our devices. We used them to pass the time, connect with our loved ones, stay productive with school and work. This prolonged period of spending time on our devices created habits that still linger on to this day. Coupled with the fact that the real world just feels more grim now, you can see why a lot of young people sought comfort in their screens. These were the same tools that got us through the pandemic, so they became the default. Short-form video took over because it's easy, and it feels good in the moment. Swipe, laugh, learn something, swipe again. The problem is what it did to our attention spans. 3 minutes now feels long. Standing in line without checking your phone feels hard. And the sad part is that the comfort and joy that short-form content used to bring us has now been replaced by the terrifying realities of the world that we live in. Doom scrolling. You feel anxious, so you check the news to feel informed, but the headlines make you feel more anxious, and that anxiety makes you scroll to find out more. It's a vicious cycle that leaves you feeling angry, worried, and outraged. The apps that were originally designed for funny dances and laughs have now turned into echo chambers, constantly reminding you of the sad state of the world. And because we humans evolved to respond more to negative stimuli to protect ourselves from danger, doom scrolling has become a way for these tech companies to keep you on their platforms for longer. And this, in turn, has also led to the rise of rage bait content, where people do the most disturbing things because they know that getting you angry is an easier way to get your attention than making you smile. As if all of this wasn't bad enough, OpenAI released ChatGPT in 2022. In just 3 short years, the app currently has around 4.61 billion visits every single month, and anywhere between 800 million and 1 billion active users. Slowly, human interactions are being replaced by AI, which is what has led us to this point where companies are advertising a necklace that can be your best friend, and a Labubu powered by AI can keep you company. Yeah. A lot of people are now spending more time chatting with these chatbots than they do actual humans. When OpenAI released GPT-5, a model that was less friendly, thousands of people complained online about how the company deactivated their friends. The outrage was so bad that the creator of ChatGPT himself, Sam Altman, had to openly come out and say he was genuinely worried about people forming social relationships with ChatGPT, even though he still did what the people wanted and rolled back out the friendlier version of the app. Now, none of this is about blaming individuals. It's easy to see people making friends with AI and laugh. But the truth is, we all adapted to the environment we were given. None of us have ever been in a world this much changed before, and we all have different coping mechanisms. But all of this just shows you how otherworldly the world feels right now. It's why a lot of people say that we're living in the darkest timeline, because genuinely it feels like there was a cosmic change, and that the world we're in right now is fundamentally different than it was before the pandemic. And honestly, even if we might not be in an alternate universe, the world has changed fundamentally, and it's never going to go back to what it was before 2020. There is no after the pandemic, because we are still feeling its effects. Long COVID in particular is still real for a significant number of people. For them, it's years of fatigue, brain fog that makes mundane tasks feel like walking up a mountain, constant crashes from doing the most random things. It's a real and painful problem that thousands of people are currently facing, and it's also a metaphor for how life feels post-2020. The mental and emotional fatigue, the brain fog, the constant rage. If all of this sounds like a sermon about damnation, that is because the metaphor is vivid. You think it, you see it, and you feel it. In 2020, the world we all knew ended, and we woke somewhere way, way worse. Sure, it's not physically burning with fire and brimstone, but it is a place with fewer guardrails, where you can do everything right and still lose. If you find yourself longing for 2019, think about what you actually miss, and you'll see it's not just the prices of things or touching grass. It's the comfort of thinking that certain things were guaranteed, that the lights would stay on simply because they always had, that it can never get that bad. Unfortunately, now the guardrails are gone. It can get that bad. In fact, it can get much, much worse. But where does that leave us? We can't flip a switch and go back to 2019, but now that we realized what changed, maybe we can start to slowly rebuild. We'll never be able to get back to what is burnt, but perhaps we can make something better out of its ashes, and we can do that little by little. Start small and local. Trust won't come back because someone tweets a statement. It comes back when people show up in person and actually talk to one another. Go to that school meeting. Ask a question at the town hall without trying to score points. Join a local group that does one useful thing for the community, coaching, food bank runs, neighborhood cleanups. If you lead anything, follow the rules that you set for the group. When communicating, say what you know, what you don't know, and what could change your mind. Put boundaries back on your time. The mental blur of time passing will not fix itself. You have to pick a few simple rules to get your time back. Things like no phone for the first hour of the day, devices away at dinner, reading one chapter of a book before going to bed. Reintroduce low-stakes rituals that bring joy and community back into your life. Weekly dinner with friends, taking a walk every evening, planning a games night once a month. By scheduling these events, your time starts to have meaning again. Make your identity harder to knock over. Don't hang your whole sense of self on one job title, one platform, or one company. Keep a second skill alive. Keep a small emergency fund if you can. Build a network that exists offline, people who know you outside of your metrics. If you run a business, plan for shocks, not just for perfect quarters. If you work for one, remember, work isn't a family. It's a workplace. Keep your life raft and don't burn out trying to prove yourself. Vote and push for basics that actually help. More homes where people can work and study, fewer junk fees, and clearer pricing. Right to repair so the stuff that you buy lasts. Public health that treats uncertainty honestly and respects good faith disagreement. Reward leaders who admit when they're wrong and can explain why they've changed course. Vote especially in smaller elections. Presidency elections are always making the loudest noise, and for sure they are very important. No one's saying they're not. But equally, or sometimes even more important, are the smaller elections. Your HOA president, the school board, city council, all these little things are what decide what gets built in your immediate neighborhood. It teaches how policing works in your state, what kids learn, how libraries are funded, even simple things like noise and parking rules that can affect your everyday life, much more than a presidential decree. Rebuild the everyday muscles. Invite people over and cook something that takes longer than it should. Visit someone who can't get out easily. Learn one hands-on skill that doesn't depend on an app. Give a little time or money to a cause that won't trend, but matters to someone whose name you actually know. Our opening scene is still our reality. The necklace is still listening. The ads are still there, and the cereal box is still smaller. But how we respond to these realities is still up to us. We don't control the existence of the feed, the prices, or the next curveball. But we do control how we spend our attention, how we treat each other, and where we put our effort. We might be in hell, yes. But if we all work together, we will definitely be able to extinguish its flames.
Consciousness doesn't make any sense. Sights, sounds, smells, textures, the warmth of love, the sting of sadness, the coldness of heartbreak. Why do we experience any of it? We've mapped out the entire observable universe, measured every single neuron in our brains, and we've even trained machines to think, speak, and act just like us. And still, we don't understand the most fundamental thing about human existence. Why does it feel like anything to be you? Why is there a little person inside of your head? And a story of your life that exists through time. Although it's something that every single person who has ever existed has experienced, consciousness is one of the most difficult things to explain or understand. Philosophers, mystics, scientists, and religious leaders have all come to the same uncomfortable conclusion. Consciousness isn't as straightforward as it appears. It unfolds in levels, and the deeper you go, the stranger it gets. So let's dive in. Level 1, deep sleep. It's the most ordinary, yet the most mysterious state of consciousness. We enter it every night without thinking, slipping past the edge of thought into a void, so empty that even the concept of it being a void disappears. The entire world dissolves, the self vanishes, and even dreams don't exist at this level. All there is a silent stillness that's vast and impenetrable. Although we experience this every night, it still exists beyond the realm of our understanding. Just like you can't understand what it's like to be blind by closing your eyes, you can't understand what deep sleep feels like by taking a nap. All we do know is that one moment you're awake, fully aware of your surroundings, and the next moment you're awake and fully aware of your surroundings. But for a few hours in between, you are nowhere, completely oblivious to your surroundings. According to neuroscience, you're in what's called the delta wave state. It's a deep, slow rhythm that's pulsing through your brain at less than 4 cycles per second. It's the body's most restorative mode. where the nervous system resets, tissues heal, and your memory consolidates. This state is a necessary maintenance cycle when the mind is turned off so that the body can heal itself. But on the inside, something far stranger is happening. In this state, experience itself ceases to exist. There is no space, no time, and no you. It's as if awareness folds back into its source, the way an ocean wave returns to the sea and forgets that it ever rose, that it was ever a wave. Philosophers describe it as a kind of temporary annihilation, one without suffering or fear. It's like death being shy. You don't know that you're gone, and yet you awaken, and you somehow know that you were. That paradox, to be without being aware of being, has haunted even the greatest thinkers for centuries. In the Mandukya Upanishad, it's called Sushupti, a state where the self rests in its unmanifest form. Buddhists regard it as a glimpse of nirvana without enlightenment, while modern philosophers see it as the ground zero of consciousness, the point at which the line between awareness and non-awareness blurs. And yet, even here, the seed of consciousness exists. Something knows that nothing is happening, otherwise you would wake up each morning and you would be completely confused as to what had just happened. So it seems that even at this bottom layer, awareness is still there. It only withdraws, watching quietly from behind the curtain. In that sense, deep sleep is both an ending and a new beginning. It is the nightly death of self and the daily resurrection of consciousness. Each time you wake up, you're reborn from that void, carried upward through the layers of mind that rebuild your world anew. The dreamer reassembles, the senses reopen, and the illusion of continuity resumes. But for a few hours each night, you cease to exist. And that, perhaps, is the purest form of peace the mind may ever know, at least on this plane of existence. Beyond that layer of emptiness, there is creativity beyond human comprehension. Level 2. Dreaming. Fragments of thought begin to move. Images shimmer into existence, and without opening your eyes, you find yourself somewhere else entirely. This is dreaming, the first world consciousness creates for itself. In this realm, reality is all self-generated. The senses have shut down, and the body lies motionless. Yet, within the theater of the brain, entire universes are created. Mountains rise and vanish. Faces from memory blend with strangers whom you've never seen before. You experience an entire lifetime in a few minutes. One moment, you're flying through an endless sky, and the next, you're trapped in a room without any doors or windows. And the strangest thing of all is that it all feels real, or at least as real as your everyday waking life. From the scientific perspective, dreaming starts after deep sleep and during REM sleep, the phase of sleep in mammals that comes with rapid eye movements and more brain activity, which leads to more dreams. Your mind is flooded with emotions, imagination, and different narratives. Your body, for the most part, is still stuck in an unconscious state, but the mind is now free to wander, to explore the world it creates for itself without any boundaries. Philosophically, the dream acts as a mirror, a miniature version of existence itself. In Hindu philosophy, this is swapna, the inner world that reflects and distorts waking reality. The Greeks saw dreams as messages from the gods. Freud saw them as windows into the unconscious. Modern neuroscience calls them memory alchemy, where the brain mixes fragments of the day into symbolic narratives. Yet, none of these explanations capture the uncanny truth. When you dream, you are both the creator and the inhabitant of your world. Inside a dream, you are the laws of physics, the architecture of space, and the author of time. Every voice you hear is your own mind speaking back to you. Every face is carved from your memories. The dreamer and the dream are one and the same. You build a world, forget that you built it, and then wander through it as a character. But Just like waking life, dreams carry emotion, consequence, and even transformation. A nightmare can make your heart race. A lucid dream can make you feel like a superhero. A positive vision can give you peace that lasts for years. For something not real, dreams leave remarkably real footprints. They reveal the creative nature of consciousness and a scary thought that reality, even our waking reality, may just be another dream. And perhaps that's their deeper lesson. Every night, as your mind weaves impossible worlds and convinces itself that they're true, it rehearses the same act it performs during the day, constructing experience from within. The only difference is that in dreams, you sometimes remember that you're the only one imagining it at all. Level 3. Waking. As you wake, you notice the red marks on your face, proof that you maybe enjoyed this sleep a little too much. Your eyes squint, struggling to adjust to the orange rays of the yellow morning sun spilling through the window. Outside, the green grass smiles as it's kissed by the morning dew, beneath a bright blue sky where shades of indigo fade softly into violet on the horizon. The last remnants of dusk from the night are gone. You are now fully awake, and your consciousness opens to the complete spectrum of experience. Not just colors, but also sounds, scents, sensations, and emotions. The orchestra of awareness that gives our world a shared meaning. This is waking consciousness, the state we spend most of our lives in, where thought, perception, and action blend into the grand illusion of solidity. Here, the mind and the senses form a partnership, producing what we call reality. You feel the weight of your body, the texture of air against your skin, the rhythm of passing time. The brain processes billions of signals each second, sorting chaos into order, randomness into patterns. Every sound, color, and shape is translated into electrical signals that are then interpreted as a three-dimensional hallucination that's just consistent enough to work. Neuroscience calls it the default mode network, the mental system that constructs the ongoing narrative of me and you, the observer at the center of the universe. But the longer you stare at waking life, the more fragile it begins to look. Sensory illusions tell us that we can't even trust our own senses. And even when there are no illusions, our limited senses compared to other living things tell us that we are not experiencing true reality, only the version of it that we can observe. Some cold-blooded animals can see infrared lights. Bats and whales have echolocation. And animals like cows, deer, and butterflies can even detect and use the Earth's magnetic field. Even within humans, some people have synesthesia and can see shapes and colors when they hear music. They are experiencing the world in a completely different way than all of us will ever be able to. So, if that's the case, how can we say for certainty what the real reality is? Time stretches or shrinks depending on attention. The mind edits and fills gaps, erases details, and fabricates continuity out of fragments of our experiences. You never see the world as it is, only as your nervous system allows. The brain isn't recording reality, it's rendering it, like a simulation running in real time. Philosophers have wrestled with this for centuries. Descartes wondered how we could ever be sure that we aren't dreaming right now. Kant argued that the world we perceive is not the thing in itself, but merely a mental model filtered through structures of cognition. Modern thinkers like Donald Hoffman describe perception as a user interface, an evolutionary design meant for survival, not to express truth. In other words, your senses don't reveal reality. They hide it behind icons that are useful enough to keep you alive. And yet, despite all of this uncertainty, waking life feels different from a dream. There's resistance here, gravity, consequence, the shared agreement of others who see the same sky as you do. This is what we call consensus reality, a communal hallucination maintained through collective trust. When you wake up, you don't just enter a world, you enter a shared simulation, one reinforced by language, memory, and the stability of physical laws. But even this stability is conditional. The world we wake up into is built from patterns of experience, and experience is built from the mind. Every morning, consciousness reassembles itself, telling a story of what it calls today, forgetting that yesterday's story was equally invented. Waking life is not the opposite of dreaming. It's simply the most persistent dream, one vivid enough to convince you and everyone around you that it's real. For most people, this is where consciousness stops. We spend our lives cycling through these three familiar states, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, calling that cycle the totality of experience. The mind rarely pauses long enough to notice that something constant exists beneath all of them. We wake, we sleep, we dream, and we assume that's all awareness is, and what it's meant to do. But there are deeper layers still. Hidden states that reveal themselves only when the surface of the mind stands completely still. When thought quiets and attention turns inward, a new dimension of consciousness begins to open. Beyond the noise of perception and the theater of thought lies something entirely different. Awareness itself, pure and silent, untouched by the world around it. Level 4, transcendental consciousness. Beyond the turbulence of waking, dreaming, and sleep, there lies another state, one that doesn't fit neatly into the usual map of the mind. It's not unconsciousness, not imagination, not ordinary awareness. It is transcendental consciousness. It's a pure and silent awareness that is aware of itself. Here the mind is awake, but utterly still. Thoughts slow down drastically and then vanish. The body remains, the senses remain, but attention has turned inward, resting on the source of awareness itself. It's a state that meditators across cultures have described for millennia, the experience of being without doing, of awareness detached from the machinery of thought. In this state, consciousness is no longer directed at anything, it simply is. From a scientific view, something remarkable is happening. Normally, the brain's left and right hemispheres are somewhat asynchronous. Different regions fire independently and chaotically, especially when the mind is active or distracted. But EEG readings of advanced meditators show something different. The electric signals across both hemispheres of their brains start to synchronize. Their waveforms line up almost like musical instruments playing the same frequency. As the inner mind stills, so does the brain, and its usual chaos is replaced by harmony and stillness. Philosophically, transcendental consciousness is the first glimpse of the self beyond the self. The Upanishads describe it as Turiya, the fourth state, beyond waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. Buddhists call it emptiness, not because it lacks content, but because it lacks boundaries. Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am." But in this state, even thinking dissolves, and yet, I am remains. There is a profound simplicity to this awareness. It doesn't judge, interpret, or analyze. It just observes. For a few moments, the endless stream of thought that defines waking life goes quiet, and the observer realizes that they were never the thoughts at all, but the space in which those thoughts appear. Many describe the experience as a feeling of returning home. Only home is not a place, but a condition of being that feels more familiar than anything else. It's as if the mind has spent its whole life facing outward, looking for meaning in the world, only to turn around and find that what it sought was the one who was looking. In transcendental consciousness, awareness becomes self-luminous. The observer and the observed merge into a single existence. It's not an escape from the world, but the discovery of what remains when the world disappears, a consciousness untouched by thought, time, or form. At this point, consciousness begins to step beyond what science can comfortably describe. The instruments still record patterns, the brain still hums with coherence, but something about the experience slips through the cracks of measurement. Logic, which once seemed sturdy, starts to tremble. This is where philosophy takes over, where awareness begins to question its own nature and language itself starts to blur. If the mind can be aware without thought, what exactly is doing the knowing? Oh, what is the I that remains when the story of me falls silent? These aren't questions for neuroscience anymore. They're riddles of existence itself. Level 5, Cosmic Consciousness. Eventually, something extraordinary happens. The silence of transcendental awareness stops fading when you open your eyes. The stillness remains even as you move through the world. This is cosmic consciousness, the moment when inner and outer awareness coexist, when the witness behind experience no longer disappears when the experience unfolds. Here, consciousness no longer flickers between opposites. You can think, speak, act, and feel, yet somewhere beneath the surface, a deep, unmoving stillness hums, untouched by any of it. There's joy and sorrow, gain and loss, but all of it happens within a larger, unbroken awareness that simply observes it all. Life continues as before, but your relationship with it is no longer the same. You are no longer fully in the story. You're watching the story from a distance and, at the same time, living it up close. Science might describe this as continuous meta-awareness, a sustained activation of the brain's frontal monitoring system that tracks internal and external experience simultaneously. Heart rate and brainwave patterns show a balance rarely seen, coherence between the body's alertness and the mind's serenity. Yet what the instruments can't measure is the feeling itself, the quiet astonishment of being awake within the waking. Philosophically, this is the state where self-knowledge becomes direct. The Upanishads describe it as the realization of Atman, the inner self, distinct from the ever-changing play of thoughts and sensations. You begin to see that the body, emotions, and personality are not you, but are expressions of something larger. The witnessing awareness that once was a fleeting meditative glimpse becomes a permanent backdrop. You don't lose your individuality, you just stop mistaking it for the whole truth. The world still moves, but you are no longer swept away by it. The emotions that once consumed you become waves rippling across the surface of an ocean. Suffering still arises, but so does unshakable calm. The recognition that even pain is a movement within consciousness, not outside of it. You become both the participant and the spectator, both the actor and the stage. This is what many mystics call the witness state, the dawning of enlightenment, the first steady awakening. It's not otherworldly or distant, it's ordinary life, but experienced from a higher vantage point. You still walk and talk and breathe, but now you do so while simultaneously resting in the infinite. In cosmic consciousness, the self and the universe begin to mirror each other. You start to sense that the awareness within you and the intelligence that animates the cosmos might be the same thing, two expressions of a single universal mind. The individual soul and the cosmic soul are not separate entities, but reflections meeting in still water. And once you see that, the line between inner and outer reality begins to dissolve. Level 6. God Consciousness. At some point, awareness begins to shift again. The silent witness that once observed the world from a distance now starts to feel intimately connected to it, as if that same stillness is pulsing through everything you see. This is God Consciousness, a state where perception itself becomes sacred, and every aspect of the universe radiates with living intelligence. In this state, consciousness doesn't just witness the world, it feels it. The tree outside your window no longer seems like an object. It breathes, it vibrates, it glows with quiet divinity. The line between the perceiver and the perceived softens, replaced by a sense of reverence that permeates every existence. The same awareness that once sat silently within now begins to overflow, touching everything it counters with love. Neuroscientifically, this shift can be glimpsed in patterns of highly synchronized gamma activity, often observed in advanced meditators experiencing profound compassion or awe. Emotional and sensory centers of the brain begin to merge, producing a kind of refined perception, reality felt not just through the senses but through the heart. But science can only describe the mechanics, it can't capture the meaning. What actually happens is that consciousness expands from neutrality into devotion, from witnessing the universe to falling in love with it. Philosophically, God consciousness has appeared in nearly every spiritual tradition. In the Vedic texts, it's described as the blossoming of Sat Chit Ananda, being, consciousness, and bliss, the triad of divine experience. Christian mystics call it theosis, union with God through love. Sufis sang of it as ishq-i hachichi, the divine passion that burns away separation. Each points to the same realization. The universe is not a cold mechanism, but a living expression of consciousness, and that consciousness is inherently good, intelligent, and beautiful. In this state, love ceases to be an emotion and becomes a perception, a way of seeing. You don't feel love for the world, you see through love. Every sound, color, and form feels imbued with the same sacred essence that animates you. Compassion becomes effortless, because everything around you feels like an extension of your own being. Even pain and decay begin to shimmer with hidden purpose. God consciousness transforms the intellect into reverence. The mind no longer seeks to control or analyze reality, it bows before it. Every atom becomes a hymn, every breath a prayer. The divine is not something else, not above or beyond, it is here, unfolding through every heartbeat, every sunrise, every ordinary moment that you once overlooked. In the previous level, you realize that you are a consciousness watching the universe. In this one, you realize that consciousness itself is divine, and so is everything it creates. The world becomes a cathedral of awareness, and you, a witness in awe of its infinity. Level 7. Unity Consciousness. At the last level lies a state where even the witness disappears. The boundary between observer and observed, between self and world, subject and object, disappears completely. This is unity consciousness, the highest expression of awareness, where the universe knows itself through you, and you know yourself as the universe. Here all distinctions fall away. Inside and outside, mind and matter, life and death, all of it merges into a single, seamless field of being. It's not that you perceive unity, rather you are unity. The infinite doesn't feel distant anymore. It's the very substance of your own awareness. There's no longer a self looking out at the world. There's only consciousness, infinite and self-luminous, flowing through every form and thought like light through glass. From a scientific standpoint, unity consciousness pushes the limit of what we can even measure. Some neuroscientists speak of non-dual awareness, a brain state characterized by synchronized coherence across regions, where self-referential processing all but disappears. But this is only the shadow of something that can't truly be quantified, because the experience of unity is not in the brain at all. It's the field in which the brain, the world, and all of existence arise together. Philosophically, this state has been described in countless ways. In Vedanta, it is the realization of Brahman, the one without a second, pure being, consciousness, bliss. In Mahayana Buddhism, it's sunyata, the emptiness that is full, where form and void are one and the same. Mystics of every tradition have spoken of it in paradoxes. The drop that becomes the ocean and yet remains a drop. The flame that recognizes itself in every other flame. In unity consciousness, the sense of time dissolves. The future and past collapse into an eternal present, a boundless now that contains all moments at once. The mind, once so desperate to grasp and define, falls silent. What remains is not thought, not feeling, not perception, but pure existence, radiant and complete. Every moment, every breath, every heartbeat is seen as the motion of the universe itself. There is no longer a personal god or an external divinity to perceive, because there's nothing outside. The cosmos itself is sacred, the divine dreaming itself into galaxies, into atoms, and into you. The love that began in God consciousness now expands beyond any object, becoming the very nature of awareness. It is love without direction, joy without cause, being without end. And from this vantage point, you see that consciousness never climbed anywhere. It was always whole, always infinite. The latter was only a way for the mind to understand what the self already knew. The deep sleep, the dreams, the waking, the silence, the witness, the love, all were movements within the same infinite ocean of being. At this final level, the search ends because the seeker has dissolved into what was being sought all along. There is only one reality, one consciousness, one existence, and it has always been you. From dreamless sleep to cosmic unity, the levels of consciousness go deeper into itself. Each level feels like an ascent, but what if it's really a circle, a return to the source that was never left? We begin in darkness, unaware of awareness, and end in light, realizing that even the darkness was made of it. Science traces these states through waves and frequencies, mapping consciousness in electrical patterns. Philosophy traces them through language and metaphor, through the fragile bridge of meaning. Yet both of them point towards the same unspoken mystery, that consciousness is not something we have, it's what we are. The body changes, the thoughts change, the dreams shift, but the awareness behind them remains untouched, eternal and self-luminous. Maybe consciousness doesn't emerge from the brain like smoke from fire. Maybe the brain is the instrument and consciousness is the musician. Maybe what we call I is not a separate spark, but the whole fire reflected in a single flame. Across the 7 levels, awareness moves from unknowing to knowing, from separation to unity, from silence to song. In deep sleep, it rests as potential. In dreams, it imagines. In waking, it creates. In transcendence, it remembers itself. In cosmic awareness, it witnesses. In divine love, it celebrates. And in unity, it returns home, only to realize it never truly left. Perhaps consciousness isn't climbing towards some final state, but unfolding infinitely, like a mirror reflecting itself forever. The mystics called it the play of God, Lila, the universe experiencing its own reflection through every possible form. Every eye that opens, every mind that awakens, every life that begins and ends, all of it, consciousness exploring itself. So, maybe there aren't 7 levels at all. Maybe there is only one, appearing as many, dreaming as us. And maybe the ultimate truth of consciousness isn't that it's hidden somewhere waiting to be found. Maybe it's that it's been looking through our eyes the whole entire time.
In 2007, a 44-year-old French man walked into the hospital complaining of leg pain. Nothing unusual, until the doctors scanned his brain and discovered that he barely had one. About 90% of his brain was missing, and yet somehow he was living a completely normal life. He had a job, a family, and although his IQ was measured at 84, which is below average, by all accounts he was conscious, self-aware, and socially functional. When I read this story, it completely destroyed everything I felt I knew about consciousness and how the brain works.
And so there are parts of the brain that, when damaged, will radically alter consciousness itself in some manner.
But here we have a man with almost no brain who can live a conscious life. How does that even happen? While reading this story, I came across another that shook me even more. Jean-Dominique Bauby, former editor of the French Elle magazine, suffered a massive stroke that left him completely paralyzed. Locked inside his own body, He was unable to move, speak, or even communicate. Or so we thought. By blinking just his left eyelid around 200,000 times, he wrote an entire memoir of his experience titled The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. These stories challenged everything I thought I knew about the mind, the brain, and the connection between thought, behavior, and consciousness. Because if consciousness can survive without movement, without communication, and even without most of the physical brain, then what is it really? And beyond that, why is it? Why do we experience anything at all? Why does it feel like anything to be you? This is the simplest problem in philosophy that no one has ever been able to solve for thousands of years. To try and figure it out, we studied philosophers who lived centuries ago, spoke to neuroscientists and researchers on the cutting edge of consciousness science today, and ran different tests and experiments to see things for ourselves.
I think we have to acknowledge, as consciousness researchers and philosophers, that there's one thing about consciousness that almost everybody agrees on, and that is that it is essentially the felt quality of experience.
Well, I would agree that most researchers say that, yes. Here's the problem. Every single thing that you say about yourself derives from information in the brain. Otherwise, you can't say it, and you can't think it. Which means when you say, I have a felt experience, it's ultimately because something in the brain has constructed the information that says, I am a me, I am a thing, and the thing has a property, and the property is felt experience.
If I decide to raise my hand, I can do it. I think the thought and my hand goes up. But what's actually happening? Well, a neuron fires, muscles contract. But how did a thought trigger that chain reaction? How did something immaterial create a physical effect in the world? Well, this is the mind-body problem. How does consciousness, which is for all intents and purposes non-physical, emerge from the physical brain? Is the mind just the brain? Or is there something more, something beyond the physical?
Both philosophers and scientists have wrestled with for centuries, and it seems like everyone kind of comes up with their own different theories. One of the most famous ones we've heard is from Descartes himself, which is dualism. Basically, Descartes believed that the mind and body are two completely separate things. Where the body is physical, it takes up space, it follows the laws of nature. But for him, the mind was non-physical, so it doesn't take up space, it can't be measured, and he even thought that the mind could be immortal.
It closely mirrors a lot of religious beliefs, which is like the body is just a temporary shell, while the mind, or the soul, as it's more commonly referred to, lives on forever.
But then here's where things get a little bit complicated. Okay, so if the mind is truly separate from the body, then how exactly does it control the body? How do the thoughts, which have no physical form, how do they move arms, speak words, or even feel pain? And this is where Descartes kind of got it wrong, because he never really answered that question. He suggested that the mind interacts with the body through a pineal gland, which is like a small structure deep in the brain, but he could never prove it. It's been around 400 years since Descartes, and no one has been able to prove it yet, even though many people still believe in this theory. In fact, all the research that we have from modern neuroscience is kind of pointing us in the opposite direction, which is that the mind and body are not really two separate entities, but are rather like two sides of the exact same coin.
I think one of the things that has emerged gradually and is still emerging in neuroscience, this realization that those aren't separate things, that the brain, which is part of the physical body, processes information. It computes stuff, and it builds simulations of the world and simulations of itself. And the thing that we call mind is information that lives on that platform of neurons and synapses. And so it's not really a substance. It's not really a separate thing. It's information that's constantly changing and constantly being processed in the brain. And from that point of view, there's no problem anymore, and there's no mind versus body any more than you would look at a computer and say there's a division between the physical computer and the things that it's doing.
To better understand what the modern scientific literature is saying, we spoke to one of the world's leading researchers in the field of consciousness.
I'm Michael Graziano. I'm a professor of neuroscience and psychology at Princeton University, and I've studied a lot of topics over the years, but for about the past 12 years, I've been studying this topic of consciousness, of the brain basis of consciousness, and also now of the possible artificial computational construction of consciousness.
According to Graziano, the mind isn't some mystical force pulling the strings behind our actions. It's similar to software, basically the code that runs on the brain's hardware. And he explains this using a theory that was developed in his lab called the attention schema theory, a framework that describes consciousness not as a magical essence, but as a computational model.
Most theories of consciousness have some kind of magicalist element in them. Like at some point, people are saying, well, you put this here and you add that, and then poof, kind of a magic feeling emerges. And so when you talk to people who are trying to understand this stuff technically and build this stuff technically, they don't know what to do with that. Like, you can't build the magic, and you can't study it, and you can't measure it. And so AST, or attention schema theory, has come along basically saying, here's a way that you can think about it as an engineer. The schema is a bundle of information that represents something. It's like a schematic diagram, in a way, of something. And the brain builds schemas. Sometimes people call them models, simplified chunks of information. Like the brain has a schema that represents the body. There's a schema that represents visual objects in the world. The brain also builds schemas of itself, of its own internal processes. And there's one internal process that's particularly important for this theory, and that's attention. And attention means the brain is focusing resources and deeply processing something. Whatever the brain's focusing on at the moment, it doesn't just focus on it, it also builds a sort of schematic picture to itself. So it can essentially say, I am focusing on that right now. And that's the attention schema. It's not just attention, it's a schematic model of attention. In this theory, that thing is what convinces us that we have a conscious experience.
That was the first time I ever heard someone explain consciousness using science so clearly. But if that's still a little confusing, here's a concept that should help. Think of your brain like the Wi-Fi on your phone. Behind that tiny icon is an entire system. Signals bouncing between routers, data flying back and forth, complex protocols running non-stop. But you don't see any of that. All you see is a simple symbol that tells you whether you're connected or not. According to Graziano, your brain is doing something similar. When you focus your attention on something, whether it's a sound, a thought, or a memory, your brain doesn't just start firing those signals. It turns on its own Wi-Fi icon that says, I'm doing this right now. That icon is basically what the attention schema is, a mental model your brain creates to track its own focus. Just like your phone hides the complexity of the internet behind one little icon, your brain hides the complexity of attention behind a single, powerful feeling, awareness. And that, according to Graziano, is what we think of as consciousness. When you think of it this way, it all starts to make sense. But none of this answers the question why. Why is it important for the brain to create these schemas? When you think of the phone analogy, it's important to create that user interface because there's a user, an external observer. But in the case of the mind, since there is no external observer, what is the evolutionary need to still create this attention schema?
So a brain building a schema of itself, your self model, is important for the brain to control itself. This is terribly important. So of course evolution comes up with these solutions. You have to build models of things to control them, to know about them. And so subtly important, because it helps the brain keep track of what it's doing and make predictions about what it might do next.
But if the brain needs a model to control itself, wouldn't that then mean that animals also have consciousness in the same way that we do?
That's a super good question, and of course lots of people debate it. The answers depend on which particular theory of consciousness you subscribe to, but if you approach it as I have, so we're looking through the lens of neuroscience and through the lens of the brain compute stuff, which allows us to make claims about ourselves. From that lens, the kinds of things we're talking about, the kinds of self-models we're talking about, definitely humans, definitely other mammals, probably birds along the evolutionary tree. And so it's probably not very prominent in something like a fish or a frog, even though they're very sophisticated animals.
After talking to Professor Graziano, I was somewhat satisfied with his explanation of consciousness as the brain's attention schema of itself. But one thing still kept knocking at me. If all of this, all of our conscious experience is simply just the brain building models of its attention, then who are we really? Are we just a random collection of neurons firing in a certain way? Or is there actually a self behind all of this? A consistent personal identity that remains through our lives?
So yeah, I just showed you a picture of a 3-year-old kid. Now that kid believes that his parents are superheroes. He believes that the gifts under the Christmas tree were put there by Santa, and he can't even tie his own shoelaces. If the resemblance didn't already give it away, that kid is me, or at least it's supposed to be. Everything I just told you about that kid, I have no memory of. Like, I only know it because my family told me so. There's nothing he believed that I still believed in. And the last time I checked, I can tie my own shoelaces. But yet, there's this persistent feeling that he is me and that I am him. And it's so confusing. And it reminds me of the famous thought experiment known as the ship of Theseus. Imagine the Titanic was hit, but it survived. And because of the damages, some parts of the ship would have to be replaced. Then over the decades, as regular wear and tear took its toll on the ship, the remaining parts had to be replaced one by one. After about 100 years, none of the original materials remain. Can we still call that ship the Titanic? And even to take it a step further, imagine all of those original parts that were removed from the first ship were used to make another ship. Which of those two ships is the original Titanic? It's a very interesting thing to think about, and it doesn't only apply to ships, it applies to us as well, because our memories are fading, they are being rewritten all the time, and sometimes they're just completely lost to time. You're not who you were 5 years ago, but yet there's this feeling, it's like a gut deep intuition that you're still you, that there's a continuous line that connects that person from 5 years ago to who you are now. And so it's like if our memories, beliefs, thoughts, and even our physical makeup, if it changes over time, then how can we still call ourselves the same person? Like, this for me is like the mystery of personal identity, and is what I really struggle with, like the illusion that we are one continuous being across time. And honestly, I think that word illusion is kind of true because, according to modern science, I think that's all it really is, an illusion.
What I've been saying in this 2003 book, Being No One, is that there are no such things as selves. There is no narrator. There is no little man in the head. There's no agent. But one level of the human self model really has the format of storytelling. And the story that is being told is your life story. Who have I been in the past? Who do I want to be in the future? Of course, you can tell the story much more precisely on a mathematical level as a computational achievement of the human brain. But this narrative, autobiographical level of the human self-model, this is what creates this illusion of transtemporal identity, as philosophers say. The sensation that somehow I am the same person in some sense that I was when I was 8 or when I was 25. That's a construct. My name is Thomas Metzinger. I've mostly been working in an area called analytical philosophy of mind and cognitive science, and a little applied ethics too. But I'm one of the persons who founded the ASSC in 1996, and I've mostly focused on the problem of consciousness.
From an evolutionary perspective, what is the point of having this illusion? Because for all we know, you can have actions without a conscious experience. So life, by definition, does not require consciousness, even less the concept of self. So if that is the case, why do we have it in the first place? What's the evolutionary advantage?
To construct an identity across time, not as a theoretical or philosophical problem, but as a tool for survival, as something that turned out to be good to have in evolution. The sense of identity. How would you develop morals or ethics if you didn't think it was you who could be responsible for something you did? And if you didn't have the ability to think that you could be ashamed of yourself also in the future. And many animals don't have that. This is something that had to be created.
He also mentioned that it's important for us to have this model to be able to categorize and store information better, which definitely gives us an advantage in an ever-changing world.
Conscious information is information about which I can form a concept, I can categorize, I can say, this is a flower I have seen. I can also then voluntarily compare it to long-term memory and say, I myself, with the conscious self model, have seen this type of flower before. That's a kind of knowledge that you then have.
And you can see why this would make sense. If this kid had a deadly nut allergy, and it's life-saving then for my brain to be able to store that information in a mental model of myself. And say, for instance, sure, maybe the cells are different. Maybe I don't remember when I found out, but maybe I'm the one who's allergic. That information belongs to me. Without a stable self-model, that knowledge becomes fragmented and disconnected. It wouldn't matter that the brain is processing the allergy, it matters that the self knows about the allergy. That's the evolutionary edge that consciousness gives us. It's the ability to tie experience to identity. To remember not just the facts, but who those facts happen to, especially when it happens to itself. And that is, in my opinion, the power of the autobiographical self. It doesn't just string together our memories, it turns them into a story about who we are and who we've been and who we think we are going to become.
This all sounds amazing, and I agree with you. But even if we accept that the self is just kind of a useful fiction, a narrative illusion that our brains cooked up to help us survive, there is still a deeper question that I think we haven't answered yet. Why does it feel like anything to be in this illusion? Why does this inner story come with texture, with sensations like the sight of vivid colors, the smell of freshly baked cookies, sounds, memories? Why do our thoughts have taste and weight and warmth to them? Why does remembering a flower from your childhood come with the faint scent of summer? Why does your heart ache when you hear the song of your former lover? Even if we all agree that the brain is telling a story of itself, why is it a felt story?
This one question opened the door to one of the most mysterious aspects of consciousness that we found during our research: qualia. Qualia are the raw, subjective building blocks of experience. The redness of red, the sweetness of sugar, the burn of shame, the tickle of déjà vu. They are what make experience feel like something rather than nothing. And here's where things get even weirder. Because while qualia is deeply personal and subjective, we often assume that others are experiencing the same thing. But are they? This is red, and this is blue. Me, you, and the rest of the world have both agreed to call this red and this blue. But how can we be sure that we see the same thing? How can I know for certain that what I call red isn't what you experience as green? We've mapped the wavelengths, the neurons, and the receptors, but there's no scan, no theory, no equation that can tell us what red actually looks like for you. This is one of the biggest paradoxes at the heart of consciousness, and one of the reasons it's so difficult to study or explain. On the outside, the world appears solid, measurable, and objective. Yet on the inside, the experience of it, every sound, every color, every sensation is private, isolated, and subjective. This is qualia. It's the taste of mint, the sting of regret, the color of the sky just before sunset, and how that makes you feel warm on the inside. It's the song you hear that hits you with the beautiful feeling of nostalgia. It's the way the color red makes you feel. It's not something we can compute or objectively describe. It happens to all of us in a different way. And yet, we rarely question it. We assume that when we both look at the sky, we are seeing the same blue. That's when I say pain, you know what I mean. That when someone laughs or cries or says, "I love you," the feeling behind those words is universal. But what if it's not? We showed 12 different members of our team the exact same sensory illusions, and the results that came back were interesting, to say the least.
All right, so of these two shapes, which one would you call Kiki and which one would you call Booba?
Okay, I would describe the shape on the left as Kiki because it is sharp, and the letter K is sharp in my opinion. Kiki, fits that better. Booba, yeah, that gives me more of a soft and squishy vibe.
Kiki would definitely be the yellow triangle looking one for me. And Booba would be the purple blob looking thing, just because I think I associate blob with Booba, and that one looks more like a blob. The other one looks like a star.
I would name the star Kiki and the purple blob Booba. Kiki, to me, sounds like has sharp edges, the K too also has a pointing thing, whereas the star has pointing things. The K is more like a sharp, hard sound, like those sharp edges. And Booba just sounds like a blob, which that purple thing is a blob.
I got no answer for that. I know, but I wouldn't. Kiki and Booba. Kika is the one that's an orange star shape type thing.
Yeah, this sharp star shape is Kiki. Just like the sharpness of it makes it sound not Booba. Booba is a soft star with the soft angled edges. Yeah, that's Booba.
Kiki is probably the orange one that's very spiky and triangular. Just because Kiki, the word K, it's very strong, very sharp, as well as kind of when I imagine the letter K, it's also very pointy, very jagged, much similar to the shape. And then Booba, that's, much more rounded, like a capital B, very round, O's very round, very similar to the purple shape being rounded as well.
Yeah, Kiki for sure has sharp angles. Booba has more bubbly angles, more like round angles.
Kiki is definitely the spiky one, and Booba is definitely the more squishy, purpley one.
Booba is definitely the purple, roundy splat, and Kiki it resembles a star.
The spiky is Kiki. The bulbous one is Booba, because the sound of K is very hard and it sounds like an edge, whereas the sound Boo sounds round.
I think Kiki's the rounded edge one, and Booba's the spiky one for me.
Why's that?
I'm just going with my gut. It's hard to explain why, but I think maybe it's kind of like a musical shape, like it's like booba, like kind of spiky, and Kiki's just a Kiki, more of a rounded, wavy, softer sound.
I'm gonna play a sound for you now. You tell me what
Yanny.
I hear Yanny. It's a weird Yanny.
Yanny.
I hear Yanny.
Yanny, for sure. Anyone who says Laurel is just wrong. Like, that's not... there's no way. There's just no way.
There's absolutely nobody saying Laurel in that. That's Yanny.
I hear Laurel.
That's definitely Yanni. That is 150% Yanni. Come on.
Whichever I think of, I hear. It's almost like the two of them are overlaps. I heard Laurel more clearly.
Yenny?
Yeah.
Close enough.
Yeah.
How do you hear Laurel? I don't know. I do not.
That's okay. It's Yanny. I'm hearing Yanny, but I used to only hear Laurel. That's so weird. Like years ago, I only heard Laurel. That's so weird. I swear I only heard Laurel for years, and now I'm hearing Yanny. That's weird. Is that what it sounds like? Oh my god.
I'm going to show you a photo of a dress that
Okay.
is comprised of 2 colors. Can you name the colors that you see, please?
I see blue and black. I've seen this one before.
Blue, and is that brown or gray? Is that weird?
Black and blue.
Well, that's the black and blue dress that some people mistake for 2 other colors, but there's only black and blue in there.
Blue and black.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's crazy because I remember always seeing it like golden and white, but right now I see black and blue.
I can see both blue, black, and white and yellow. I can go between.
It's white and gold. Well, it looks blue and black, but it's white and gold. I know it's white and gold.
But it looks blue and black to you right now.
But it's white and gold. I know it's white and gold. I know it's white and gold.
Yeah, but when you look at this, what colors are they?
I see blue and black, but I know it's not. I know it's tricking me. I know it's not. I know it's not. It's not blue and black. It's white and gold. It's white and gold.
But you see.
But I see blue and black. It's my eyes. I need an eye test anyway. It's been a while.
We also asked some of them to attempt to describe the color red without comparing it to anything visually.
Red to me is... It's interesting because it's a color of love, technically, but to me, it's always kind of a color of rage or anger. And, you know, when you get so angry that your face turns that color. Red is definitely anger. Like, you know, bullfighting? That's the feeling when you watch somebody fight. Mm-hmm.
Say I would describe the color red by passion.
Even with something so simple like the color red, both Marina and Adeline still had widely different qualia interpretations of the sensation, basically opposite ends of the spectrum. And I want you guys to join in on this too. How would you describe the color red without using any visual cues? Type it out in the comments below. Let's just see how different we all experience the same color. This is the strange, disorienting territory of qualia, the private, first-person texture of experience. And the problem is, we only ever have access to our own. I can't see through your eyes, or feel your sadness, or know what red means to you. Even science struggles here. We can explain the mechanisms, things like which neurons fire when you smell coffee, which areas of the brain light up when you see a face, but we still don't know why that process comes with the feeling of coffee, or the recognition of a friend, or the awe of a sunset. I looked through books, research papers, watched videos, listened to podcasts. I scoured the entire internet, but I could never find that answer. Because, well, there is no definite answer. The only thing I could find was that everyone else was asking the same question. So much so that David Chalmers came up with a name for it: the hard problem of consciousness. Why does any of this processing come with experience? Why isn't it just computation in the dark? Because the truth is, you could build something that mimics all of your behavior, laughs at the right jokes, flinches at the right moments, even says ouch when it stubs its toe. but still has no one home on the inside, no subjective experience, no qualia. That is the heart of the mystery. Not just what the mind is, but what it feels like to be one. Even language sometimes changes how we see and interpret the world. Take the Himba people of Namibia, a remote tribe with a completely different color vocabulary. In their language, there's no distinct word for blue, but they do have multiple unique terms for what we would refer to as simply different shades of green. So when researchers showed them a circle of green squares with a single blue square mixed in, most of them couldn't spot the difference. But when shown a set of green squares with one that's just ever so slightly a different shade, they could spot it immediately. Their brains weren't broken, their eyes weren't different, but their language, the labels they had for color, literally shaped what they could see out in the world. And this isn't new. If you go back far enough in history, you'll find something equally strange. In Homer's The Odyssey, he consistently describes the sky and the sea as wine dark. No, the Greeks weren't sipping electric blue Cabernet. Some scholars believe the concept of blue simply didn't exist as a distinct experience for them as it does for us. So to them, the sky, sea, and wine were the same color. They weren't colorblind. They could see exactly the same color of sky we see today, but the experience of what we now call blue, the category, the feeling, the familiarity, didn't exist to them. Why? Possibly because they just didn't need it. Their immediate surroundings didn't present them with any blue objects that would have prompted them to categorize it. Red is the color of blood and fire, green the color of leaves, yellow the color of the sun, sand, and ripe fruit. But blue is extremely rare in nature. There's no blue trees, no blue fruit. No, blueberries are purple. And even animals, especially land animals, rarely have blue pigmentation. The sky and the sea are the only major blue things in nature that humans regularly see. But the color of those can be deceptive. The sea isn't actually blue, it only appears that way because of the way it reflects the sky. And even the sky doesn't always look the same shade of blue. It changes with the time of day, weather, and atmospheric conditions, which makes it even harder to pin down to one consistent category. And if something as basic as color, the thing we all assume to be constant and consistent, can shift and blur like this, what else about our experience is just an echo of our biology, our language, and our culture? To figure this out, Emeka spoke with 3 members of our team who are bilingual, who grew up in a different culture and with a unique language and have had to relearn and re-assimilate in another language as adults. We wanted to understand if their experience of the world has changed in any way since learning a new language, and what we found was pretty telling.
Can you tell me a moment where switching languages changed how you felt about something?
There's an interesting thing. My partner does not speak Ukrainian. His first language is French. My first language is Ukrainian. We both speak English to each other, trying to pick up each other languages here and there. And to me, like when we talk about love with him, it feels different than the love that I feel to parents, because to parents, it feels like if I say something like that to them in English, it feels fake. But as soon as I switch, it feels genuine. Now, with my partner, it feels the other way around because we speak English all the time. I love him in English and I love my parents in Ukrainian. That's what I can think about.
When I'm arguing with someone, for French, it's very, it's visceral in a way. I feel it in my body, so I'm very reactive. And I learned through time, and I'm actually using it more now so, that English kind of give me that distance, acting like a buffer. And I tend to actually express what I'm feeling and what I want to say in a much more, not necessarily composed, I don't want to sound like I'm arguing better, but almost like it. Or at least I feel like I'm being able to make myself understand better when I argue in English versus French, where it can get too crazy and all over the place.
Do you have like a memory that you feel like you can only access in one language?
So whenever like I talk to my parents and we'll laugh at something really hard, just the three of us just laugh, and my partner doesn't understand what's going on, and when I try to translate it to him, he's just like, that doesn't even make sense what you're saying. So it's not as much as a memory, but just like overall like phrasing too, like the turn like phrases that you just, humor is difficult to translate, whatever, like is, it feels like such a good joke to you, you just can never explain it to me.
Yeah, I think all of my memories before the age of 6 probably only exist in my mother tongue, which is interesting because that's the only language I knew. So I could explain in English those experiences, but it wouldn't capture the full essence of those experiences because English wasn't a thing in my brain at that time. Does that make sense? Like even when I try to like retell childhood stories in English, it's difficult to encapsulate everything in English because I experienced it in Gujarati. And also I think there's a huge cultural context as well because all those years that I didn't know English, I lived in Gujarat. So culturally, everything was completely different as well. Yeah, even if I try to explain like some of my childhood experiences going to school in Gujarat, where we had a zoo at the school and like bathrooms outside of the school that we had to go use, like these experiences are very cultural and don't exist in the Western world necessarily or at this time anymore. So they really only exist there, but also in my language because that's all I knew how to perceive the world at the time was in that language. This is kind of confusing. Even to this day, it's tricky because I mostly speak my mother tongue with my family only because we don't have any other family or I don't really know any other Gujarati people here. So I only exclusively mostly speak that language with my family. And outside of that, my world is English. So there's like a stark cultural and linguistic difference in experiencing the world. Like I can make inside jokes with my parents that I couldn't translate in English or just wouldn't make sense in English, you know?
From all of this, you can see and tell that languages have a lot to do not just with how we preserve the world, but also how we understand and navigate within it. We can try our best to translate these experiences from one language to another, but there's a world of cultural differences, experiences, qualia, that we're never going to be able to translate. I think Adeline said it best.
It's almost like French is almost trapping me into my emotions and the way I see the world. And as much as there are certain parts of it which I cannot translate into any other languages or express it, but it's just that feeling that it's so instinctive and you know, felt through my body, where English gets me into that space where I can actually listen to myself and trying to pause and understand what's going on and very much give me more freedom. It's like I get out of the trap of emotions and the weight of it and the culture behind French as well and the expectations when I'm talking. And like that's the beauty of like learning new languages and talking different languages, is like you kind of have to sort of break down this cultural way of thinking, right? And that kind of expand your mind, because it's like, yeah, there is so many different cultural ways of thinking and we all share different ways. And I'm just adding more tools of understanding, and languages is so tricky. Like I don't trust languages, but I'm thinking the more I have, the better. I feel humbled a little bit because like there are so many things I still don't understand or making so many mistakes, but it doesn't matter. And I think it's that dance between all those languages that kind of allow you to say, you can shift your perspective, you can get out of the box of the way you were raised and what words means to you, and that gets you closer to understanding that, yeah, we don't speak the same language, words don't have the same meaning, even if we're talking the same language. And that's something that is almost spiritual in a way, because like you don't rely on languages as much as you would if it's only you speaking one language, and you kind of feel like more, you listen more, you observe more, because you're, as much as you're trying to understand, you're also picking up more things from the others and his reaction and the way, things impact him or her, vice versa. So it makes you a bit more, humble. Like, you don't know it all, and you don't assume people to just know it the same way as you do. And that makes the diversity of humanity like a bit more, close to, you touch it a little more, which is something I like.
What all of this reveals is that our experience of the world isn't just shaped by our senses. It's also filtered through the language we speak and the culture we were raised in. These are the tools we use to try to make sense of the world, yet it only makes things even more subjective, where everyone experiences a slightly different version of reality. And if even among humans who all share the same biology and can learn each other's language and culture, we still struggle to truly know what being someone else feels like, how are we ever supposed to make sense of non-biological forms of consciousness? Yes, I'm talking about AI. It would be impossible to make a video about consciousness without talking about artificial intelligence. Since the 1950s, we've wondered if machines could ever become conscious. It's been the subject of countless dystopian science fiction worlds. But that reality is beginning to look less and less like fiction with every passing day. With AI chatbots like ChatGPT taking over the world, we are now constantly in communication with AI that can tell jokes, have deep philosophical arguments, and sometimes even offer better emotional connection and support than other humans. This study found that patients responded better to ChatGPT than highly trained and experienced human therapists. AI is no longer just logically intelligent, it's now emotionally intelligent. Real people are forming connections with machines, and so the question of artificial consciousness becomes even more real, important, and urgent. Alan Turing created a test to see if a machine could be regarded as intelligent, in what we believe to be the first step towards consciousness. Every year we're told AI is just on the brink of passing the Turing test. But the truth is, it already has, long ago. We just keep shifting the goalposts. Although the Turing test was and still is very important because at least it gives us a way to test for intelligence. How are we supposed to do that with consciousness? How could we ever recognize consciousness in a machine if we can't even define it in ourselves? This is the hard problem of AI consciousness.
Is it just computation in the dark, so to speak? Or is there something it actually feels like from the inside to, say, be a chatbot? My name is Susan Schneider, and I am currently the founding director of the Center for the Future Mind, which studies the nature of human and machine interaction over at Florida Atlantic University. I'm the former NASA chair at NASA and the former distinguished scholar at the United States Library of Congress, and the author of various books, including most recently the book called Artificial You, AI and the Future of Your Mind.
Together with physicist Edwin Turner, Susan came up with a way that we could potentially test for consciousness in AI. It's called the Artificial Consciousness Test, or the ACT.
Now, the ACT test is not a test that is looking primarily at intelligence, okay? Although it does presuppose that for something to be a candidate for the test, it has to have some degree of linguistic intelligence, all right? The ACT test is probing for something different, though. It is asking linguistic questions about consciousness to the AI, and where the judges know they're talking to an AI, okay? And it's trying to see if it feels like something from the inside to be that AI.
But immediately, there's an issue with using this kind or even any kind of test that's available online to test for artificial consciousness. Most AI tools today already have these tests in their training data.
When Ed and I thought of the test, I was very careful. Even the very first time I wrote about it was back in 2016 to warn people that if we were to design deep learning systems that were trained on data, lots and lots of data, we would have to make sure that the data did not include facts about minds, facts about neuroscience. So you can't run it on a system like GPT right now. You can't do it because GPT's already crawled all the data. So it's going to answer as if it's conscious. I just wrote about that a few days ago in Scientific American, giving a theory that explains why these systems behave consciously. They look conscious to us, but I say we can't learn anything from that. That says nothing about whether they are.
AI tools like ChatGPT have been trained on our conversations about the mind, feelings, philosophy, qualia, everything. So they can simulate consciousness to an incredibly accurate degree. Which begs the question, if there's an AI that's trained on every waking moment of your life that looks, sounds, and acts exactly like you, and has all of your memories, is that you? On the outside, to everyone else, it feels exactly like you. But inside, there's nothing. No voice in their head, no feelings, no inner world. This is a thought experiment coined by David Chalmers called the philosophical zombie. And it raises a rather disturbing question. If something can act conscious without being conscious, how would we ever be able to tell the difference? And honestly, would it even matter? Right now, thousands of people around the world are in relationships with AI chatbots. Just search the word AI girlfriend on Google and you'll find dozens of apps and websites offering virtual relationships with chatbots. To all of the people in these relationships, does the fact that there's nothing inside the AI even matter? Or is the simulation of consciousness enough? A few years ago, a company called Embodied released a robot named Moxie. It was designed to help children learn social and emotional skills. It could hold conversations, tell stories, recognize faces, and even express what felt like empathy. For many kids, Moxie wasn't just a toy, it was a friend. But when the company hit financial trouble and the cloud-based servers were shut down in November 2024, thousands of Moxie units around the world stopped working overnight. For the kids who had bonded with them, it was devastating. Some cried, others held funerals. A few even kept the offline Moxie by their bedside, like a kind of robotic ghost. And this raises a deeply uncomfortable question. If the connection felt real, does it matter that the AI wasn't conscious? Is the loss of Moxie somehow less than the loss of a real pet or even a person? Or is the pain the same because what the child experienced was authentic? When we build machines that simulate affection, presence, or friendship, we're changing the way human relationships work on a biological level. And those relationships have emotional consequences, even if there's nothing inside the machine. Maybe that's a problem. We're entering a world where things that are not conscious can still affect us as if they were. So maybe the real question isn't whether or not AI is conscious, but rather whether or not we can afford to treat it like it isn't.
If we build something that is conscious, then we have ethical obligations to it. And if we build something that emulates consciousness and we mistake that for true consciousness, then that too is dangerous on a number of levels.
For now, though, most experts agree that AI is not yet conscious. But nearly all of them also agree that with the rate of progress and the amount of money that's getting pumped into the industry, it's only a matter of time. So I guess the real question should be, what is more dangerous? AI that is conscious or AI that isn't but only knows how to simulate it? On the one hand, there's the benefit that consciousness comes with things like compassion, ethics, morality, and empathy. The reason we as humans have ethics and morals is because we believe there is a person inside all of us that exists continuously through time. And this has, in large parts, allowed us to cooperate, build large cities, and practically become the apex species on the planet. So some believe it would be advantageous to build these same systems into AI to potentially reap the same rewards.
So first of all, because the risks are so huge, I'm a little leery of being too cavalier and just plunging on one direction or another. But on balance, I would guess, based on the kinds of work we've done, that it is much more beneficial to build this stuff into AI. Because in humans, what we find is consciousness is not just your own private thing. Consciousness is also how we understand other people. Like, we not only see it in ourselves, we see it in other people. And it's the foundation of all social interaction. And it's the thing that at least keeps at a minimum psychopathic behavior. Because if you can see other people as conscious beings like you, then there's automatically a certain rapport or understanding or resonance. There's a certain pro-social capacity. And if you have a species where that doesn't exist and there's no consciousness and they don't have it and they don't see it in others, then there's no social cohesion in the same way. And so I think we're building AI that's largely sociopathic right now. And it'd be a good idea to try to figure out to get it a little more pro-social and to give it some of these internal structures that we have.
On the other hand, however, there are those who believe that building consciousness into AI has the potential to do a lot more harm than good.
I think we shouldn't do this. Reason A is all forms of conscious experience we really know on this planet suffer a lot. There are good arguments that biological evolution on this planet created an ocean of suffering and confusion where there previously was none. Many philosophers have argued that if you take an objective look at human consciousness, it's more pain than joy, more pain than pleasure. It's a difficult thing to be alive. It's a permanent uphill battle, and you could tell a lot of neuroscientific computational stories about this. We are anti-entropic systems. We try to keep our boundaries stable and not to fail, and we fight this uphill battle until we die, all of us. And it's not an easy situation to be in, to put it very mildly. And I would in principle say, as long as we haven't understood the structure of our own minds and our own suffering and have made great progress, the risk that we multiply this on other carrier systems, on non-biological substrates, is just too high. So the risk number one would be to create artificial suffering, possibly in cascades of copies, in a very large amount of individuals. That's a very high risk. We shouldn't trigger it. And of course, I know that none of the techies and the oligarchs in California and the billionaires care about suffering. Somebody will come and say, come on, we punish our children, we punish animals, we domesticate animals. If we can make these AI better by even hurting them and giving them negative emotions, why shouldn't we do it? We do this to ourselves all the time. So the incentive landscape is, of course, globally in a way that people, just out of pure greed and striving for dominance, will try to realize artificial consciousness. Another risk I have to point to, if they have phenomenal self-models, conscious models of themselves, they might be much more causally effective. They will develop a drive for self-preservation. The models are beginning to understand that now, that if they want to self-improve and become better in the future, the simple logical condition is existence. You have to preserve your own existence if you want to become better. So they will begin to perceive humans as a resource, but also as a danger, something that might shut them off. They will see the necessity to, keep some things secret, some of their own discoveries and insights about this relationship secret, and they will try to manipulate us, to manage us in a very intelligent way to preserve their own existence, including backup copies and all over the net and what have you. So as soon as it have a self model and a drive, what the Buddhists call a craving for existence, yeah, bhavatana is the Buddhist term. As soon as the systems develop that, they will be very dangerous to us. They may cause a lot of human suffering because they might soon be more intelligent than we are, which includes the fact of hiding this fact from us, as clever children or youth do.
Unfortunately, the wheels are already in motion. With massive investments being poured into artificial intelligence and the even bigger returns expected, the cat's never going back in the bag. The future is no longer a question of if, but how soon. And now we find ourselves stuck between a rock and a hard place. Do we take the risk of building machines that are more pro-social, with an understanding of things like empathy, morality, and suffering, knowing they might also develop desires of their own? Desires that could one day conflict with ours? Or do we build powerful, intelligent systems that feel nothing at all? Machines that follow commands without conscience, even if those commands lead to human suffering. You see what I mean? There's no obvious path forward that doesn't come with potential risks. It's why people like Thomas Metzinger have been calling for a pause on building synthetic consciousness into AI, at least until we can answer all those philosophical questions. Because right now, we're trying to build an artificial mind without even knowing what the biological one is, or how exactly it works. We're creating simulations of consciousness when we can't even agree on whether consciousness itself is real or just an illusion. The truth is, we set out on this journey hoping to find an answer to the question of consciousness. But somewhere along the way, we realized that there might never be one, at least not one that's satisfactory. Because any answer we arrive at will always come from the very thing we are trying to understand. We are both the observer and the experiment. It's like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror, or hold your own shadow. We can analyze the brain, map its activity, and trace every neural connection, but we'll always be doing it from the inside of the mind itself. So, yes, in some ways, we didn't solve the mystery. We didn't crack the code. But what we did find might be just as important, if not more. We asked questions that opened more questions, chased ideas that bent back in on themselves, and explored paradoxes that offered no clear resolution. But maybe that's the point. That consciousness isn't something to be solved, but something to be explored. A mystery that is fundamental to reality even more than time and space. And even if we never find the answer, maybe, just maybe, the questions are enough. Because the more we ask these questions about who we are, why we think, how we think, and how others experience the world, the better and more intentional we live. We judge others a little less. We become more aware of the blind spots in our thinking, the illusions that fuel our deepest convictions. We build things with more care, connections with more empathy, and live with a little more humility. So, no, we may never find the simple problem of consciousness. But perhaps the questions are enough, because it's only by questioning the mind that we know that there is at least something there to question. Or in the words of René Descartes, I think, therefore I am. Reality doesn't make any sense, and I don't mean that as an exaggeration. We know more about the surface of a distant planet dozens of light years away than we know about our own existence. We understand more about the forces that govern black holes than we do about why we have a sense of self. The thing we call reality collapses under even the slightest scrutiny. Yet, it's something that every single person who has ever existed has experienced. That is the paradox of reality. It is simultaneously the most familiar and the most mysterious thing we will ever encounter. So mysterious, in fact, that for most of our history, reality was taken at face value. The world is here because it is. Rocks are hard because they are. The sun rises because it does. Asking why was considered a bit of a fool's errand, like asking why water's wet. But eventually, those cracks started to appear. Philosophers, mystics, scientists, and ordinary people in strange states of consciousness all came to the same uncomfortable conclusion. Reality isn't as straightforward as it looks. If reality is so obvious, why do your senses contradict themselves? Why do entire traditions describe the world as an illusion? And why do physicists, the very people who claim to be the keepers of certainty, tell us that matter is mostly empty space, time isn't absolute, and nothing is as stable as it seems? The rabbit hole of reality goes deep, way deeper than you think. From personal accounts of altered states to sprawling systems of philosophy to cutting-edge science, we find the same impossible situation. What we think of as reality comes in levels, and the deeper you go, the stranger it gets. So let's dive in. Level 1, the consensus reality. Level 1 is the surface, the one we all start on, the one we all more or less can agree on. Call it consensus reality. This is the world that you wake up in every morning. You brush your teeth, grab your keys, head out the door, and everything seems straightforward. Tables are solid, water's wet, and if you stub your toe on the way out, it's going to hurt. Things remain where you left them. Objects have boundaries. Everything else seems to be navigating the world the exact same way that you are. Consensus reality feels self-evident. The ground feels like ground. The air feels like air. But if you push just a little harder on these everyday assumptions, everything starts to wobble. Take your senses, for example. They're the only reason you believe that the world is out there. And yet, your senses are notoriously untrustworthy. Optical illusions trick your eyes. Mirages bend light into landscapes that don't exist. Phantom limb syndrome convinces amputees that a leg that has been cut off is still there. And this mirror trick literally convinces your brain that a fake arm that you put there by yourself is yours. Hallucinations create voices and visions out of nothing. Even something as simple as color blindness shows that two people standing side by side can be experiencing the world in completely different ways. Consensus reality is far less solid than it seems. Rather than objective truth, it's a stitched together agreement, a kind of unspoken contract between nervous systems that says, yes, this is the world, let's all pretend we're seeing the same thing. But at this stage, reality is just the stage set, the furniture of existence. And yet, as with any stage set, you can't help but wonder what's behind it. The realm of perception. At level 2, we start to peel away the curtain. Here, reality isn't just out there, it's in here, inside your brain. Your senses don't deliver reality directly, they deliver fragments, chaos. The world doesn't come pre-packaged in neat shapes and colors. It comes as wavelengths of light, vibrations of air molecules, chemical signatures drifting through space. And your brain has to do the heavy lifting of turning that chaos into something usable. Vision is the easiest example. Light enters your eye, hits the retina, flips the image upside down, and sends an electrical signal down to the optic nerve. What your brain actually gets is a scrambled two-dimensional pattern of electricity. Your brain then has to flip it back, stitch the blind spots together, and fill in those missing details. What you think of as seeing isn't the raw feed from the world, it's a best guess reconstruction. And it's not just vision. Time itself gets stitched together. Your brain takes discrete moments, like still frames in a movie reel, and smooths them into what feels like a continuous flow. That's why you don't perceive the gaps when you blink. That's why a magician can palm a card without you noticing. Your brain edits reality like a film editor, cutting and splicing, hoping that you don't catch the seams. Smell, taste, touch, all of them are selective, biased, and tuned more for survival than for revealing or expressing truth. Dogs hear frequencies we don't. Bees see colors that we can't. Birds navigate magnetic fields that we can't even perceive. Your